Greetings, YouTube. I am not a fan of Will Ferrell's comedy. In fact, I would say that I consider him one of the most profoundly unfunny people in Hollywood. I would rank him up there with Rob Schneider and Adam Sandler as people that couldn't make me laugh if they paid me. So I avoided, and still avoid, most of his films. But for some reason, I'm not really sure why, I saw Stranger Than Fiction. And all that came before was forgiven. Will Ferrell plays Harold Crick, a senior IRS auditor, not a man well liked by people. And the film opens with narration as Harold prepares for his day. Now the interesting thing is that the narration is not for the benefit of us, the viewers of the movie. The narration is being done by the author of a novel. For you see, Harold Crick is not just the main character of our film, he is also the main character of a novel in that film. And one morning, while brushing his teeth, Harold Crick hears the narrator. Now imagine for a moment you are brushing your teeth, something you do every day, and suddenly you hear a strange British woman's voice who is describing exactly what you're doing. How do you think you'd react to that? Well, Harold thinks someone's in the room, or at least someone is speaking to him from an outside source. But Harold's a very staid, boring, rigid person. So he does his best to ignore the voice. And he continues to do his best to ignore the voice, even though it keeps showing up and disappearing at irregular intervals throughout his day. People begin to think Harold's a little odd, this coming from a man who does multiplication for people just for fun. And Harold may have continued like this, trying to ignore the voice, until the voice says that Harold's going to die. That causes Harold to suddenly listen rather intently. Harold seeks professional help. He is told that he suffers from schizophrenia. Harold does not suffer from schizophrenia, because he doesn't. He knows he doesn't. He says, well, if I don't suffer from schizophrenia, what would you suggest? The doctor says, well, it sounds like you read a story. I would look into talking to someone who understands literature. So he seeks out a professor. And this is where Dustin Hoffman comes into the film, in what is quite possibly his greatest supporting actor role I have ever seen him in. He is a wonder. His delivery is crisp and dry. It doesn't hurt the fact that the writing in this film is laser sharp. And so Harold and the professor attempt to figure out whose voice he's hearing. And eventually they figure out that it's a British author named Katherine, a recluse, a woman that's been desperately trying to write her latest novel for ages, and who has had an assistant played by the wonderful Queen Latifah thrust upon her in an effort to help push that novel out the door. He wants to meet this woman, so he goes about his way to find her. And all along this journey that he's been going through, listening to this narration, trying to find this woman, he's met Anna the baker. And Anna the baker is so unlike Harold. She's a bohemian spirit, free, loving, open, a bit of a socialist, doesn't much like the government, doesn't much like Harold. But their developing relationship is wonderful to behold. It blossoms, it grows, it's just a joy. And eventually, they do connect. So Harold really doesn't want to die. He really wants to find that author. And, being the smart man he is and working for the IRS, he's able to. So he calls her. And as he's calling this author, the author is typing, I should say, at a typewriter, low-tech typewriter. that Harold is calling the author that is narrating his life. And she types, "The phone rings." And the phone in the room she is in rings. But it doesn't ring a second time like a phone should. Ring, ring, ring. It rings once. She thinks nothing of it. So she types the next line. The phone rings again. And the phone rings again. Now she realizes something is amiss. She prevents her assistant from answering the phone. She delays. She types out again. The phone rings a third time and hits the period. The phone rings a third time. She rushes forward. She grabs the receiver. She puts it to her ear. And you hear, "Is this Katherine Eiffel? My name is Harold Crick." And this look washes over her face of horror, of terror. She drops the phone, screaming and recoiling, because she's hearing the voice of a man that's only supposed to live in here. She meets him, flabbergasted. Her assistant suggests, let him read the book. So he brings the book to the professor reads the book, the professor breaks the horrible news to Harold, that Harold, you have to die, because this is a truly great film, a great book. If you don't die, this book will never be made. This book will never see print, and that would be a tragedy. That would be a loss to the entire English reading world. So Harold reads the book. Harold decides that it's true. That the book is so good, so important, that his death is worth the publication of this book. Now think about that for a second. There are many artists and authors in the world who would die for their own art. But would you be willing to die for someone else's art? Willing to die, to give up your life willingly, eyes wide open as you walk into the dark, for someone else's art? I've seen this movie 3 times. Each time I've seen the film, I've liked it more. It may be fast approaching to be one of my favorite films. It's a wonder. It's art. It's well crafted, well written, well acted, well delivered. The characters are incredible. Maggie Gyllenhaal plays Anna the baker wonderfully. She is real and flesh and blood, and you can feel her presence on that screen. You could reach in and shake her hand and know that that is who she is. I was stunned and amazed by this film the first time I saw it, and I still am. I don't have a commentary track for it, unfortunately. I'm hoping to get a copy at some point that has one, because it would be well worth to hear what the director thought about while they were making this. Because I thought of many things. I can't call this film a romantic comedy, even though it does have comedic and romantic elements, because it talks about things like life and death and art, free will and fate. It deals with many things. It's literally a multi-layered movie. Harold is the main character of a film, and a main character of a book, and a main character in his own life. And even if Will Ferrell spends the rest of his life making one crappy comedy after another, I'm giving him a pass. He can make as many as he wants to. He can pull the cash in hand over fist forever, making pablum for the masses, and I don't care, because he made this movie.